A woman can't make that shot. The words had followed Staff Sergeant Sofia Vasquez through most of her military career. They came in whispers, in smirks, and sometimes, like now, in the steady voice of a commander who simply could not imagine trusting her with the fate of the world. Commander David Patterson of SEAL Team 7 had never hidden his doubts. To him, she was an outsider, skilled perhaps, but not the kind of warrior he believed belonged in the company of men hardened by years of brutal missions. And yet, with nuclear missiles 30 seconds from launch, Patterson had no one else to turn to. Sofia "Ghost" Vasquez, 28 years old, with dark hair braided in tactical precision and steady brown eyes fixed through her scope, adjusted her rifle. 7,000 meters away, inside a heavily guarded compound, a rogue scientist prepared to initiate a strike that could ignite a chain reaction of nuclear war. The irony was bitter. For years, her commanders had doubted her. Now, she was the only chance they had left. Sofia's journey had not been written by accident or luck. It had begun long before she wore a uniform, in the wild mountains of Montana, where silence stretched further than roads, and the wind carved its own language across the valleys. Her father, Miguel Vasquez, a retired Marine sniper, believed his daughter deserved the same discipline he had lived by. He taught her that shooting was never just about steady hands. It was about patience, numbers, and responsibility. "Mija," he would say, his voice carrying over the ridges as they lay prone on the grass. A true sniper doesn't simply hit a target. A true sniper understands that one bullet can change history. That responsibility is heavier than the rifle you carry. From childhood, Sofia's weekends were spent on ridgelines, in forests, and across snow-dusted clearings, where she learned to read what others could not see. She tracked how the wind shifted around cliffs, how morning air differed from evening haze, how temperature, pressure, and humidity bent steel midair. By the time she was 16, hunters whispered her name with awe. Veteran marksmen marveled at her ability to strike with precision at distances that seemed impossible. Her father's training was not casual practice. It was an education. He handed her physics textbooks, meteorology guides, and mathematical problems. While others her age memorized equations in classrooms, Sofia was solving them on mountaintops, calculating bullet drop and wind drift in her head. She could see numbers in the way trees bent, in the way mirages shimmered on hot ground, in the way echoes carried across valleys. By 18, she was hitting targets beyond 2,000 meters, with equipment that wasn't even military standard. Some professors suggested she study engineering. She considered it briefly, but her heart was with service. She wanted the uniform, the discipline, the weight of duty. So she enlisted. At sniper school, she shocked her instructors. Drills that exhausted others felt natural to her. Long shots that caused sweating brows and bitten lips were for her merely opportunities to refine her calculations. She broke records, set new benchmarks, and redefined the expectations of what a trainee could do. Yet even as her skills spoke louder than words, whispers lingered. "She's too calculated. She spends too long setting up. Not aggressive enough." Sofia ignored them. She let her rifle answer instead. And in Syria, her answer earned her the call sign Ghost. During a dangerous extraction mission in a crumbling city, she provided overwatch from a hidden rooftop. Enemy fighters never saw her, never even suspected her position. One by one, they dropped before they could react. Their threats dissolved into silence. To the team below, it was as though a phantom had walked among their enemies. Reports described her not as a soldier, but as a ghost. The name stayed. But names did not erase prejudice. Commander Patterson embodied that resistance. With nearly 2 decades of SEAL operations, his chest heavy with medals, his worldview had been shaped by tradition, by men who relied on muscle, aggression, and firepower. To him, patience and calculation were luxuries, and women in critical combat roles, that was a contradiction he could not accept. Still, the world does not bend to prejudice, and fate cares little for tradition. The crisis that would thrust Sofia into history began with a scientist named Viktor Klov. Once celebrated for his brilliance in Soviet weapons programs, Klov had turned rogue. Not content with selling secrets, he had built a missile system and stolen uranium. His plan was monstrous in its simplicity. launch a nuclear strike against a major city, make it appear to be the act of another nation, and watch the world spiral into retaliatory destruction. His compound was built with precision, shielded by mountains and bristling with air defenses that made direct assault impossible. Any team on foot would be detected long before they came close. Air support was suicide. The only option was one impossible shot, a bullet fired from 7 kilometers away. In the initial briefing, Patterson ignored her presence. "We need our best long-range shooter," he declared. He turned not to Sophia, but to his own marksman, Petty Officer Marcus Rodriguez. Rodriguez was skilled, reliable, but his longest confirmed kill had not even reached 2,000 meters. Against 7,000, he was unprepared. Sophia spoke once, calmly. "Sir, I have made combat shots beyond 3,000 meters. I've studied the conditions necessary for extreme ranges. My training is built for this." Patterson dismissed her with cold finality. "Sergeant Vasquez, this mission demands toughness under the shadow of nuclear war. A woman can't make that shot." She said no more. Words wouldn't change his mind. Instead, she prepared in silence, her calculations scribbled in notebooks, her scope fixed on the distant compound, her mind shaping numbers into possibility. And now, as minutes became seconds, as the hum of catastrophe drew near, Commander Patterson finally looked at her, the very soldier he had dismissed. In his eyes, there was no choice left. In her scope, there was only the target. The fate of the world now balanced on the steady breath of the sniper they had all doubted. The Army had been Sophia's proving ground. She entered at 18, carrying not just a rifle but the weight of her father's lessons and the quiet fire to show the world what she could do. Boot camp broke down many recruits, stripping them of arrogance or comfort. But for Sophia, it was simply another mountain to climb. The long runs, the drills, the endless inspections, she endured them with a calm patience that confused instructors. While others cursed under their breath, she focused on her breathing, her posture, her rhythm. Years of mountain training had already taught her endurance. The Army merely gave her a uniform for it. Her shooting scores drew immediate attention. Instructors couldn't deny what their eyes saw. Targets at impossible distances marked by her bullets, each one almost surgically placed. She was recommended for sniper school without hesitation. Yet from the moment she arrived, she felt the weight of expectation mixed with doubt. The school was grueling. Candidates were pushed to their limits with days of field exercises, camouflage challenges, and endless shooting tests. Sophia didn't just pass them, she excelled. Her longest confirmed training shot was over 3,000 meters, a record that had instructors double-checking her calculations. They called it luck at first, but when she repeated the feat under different conditions, with shifting winds and heavier rifles, they began to whisper. She wasn't lucky. She was rewriting what was possible. But excellence, she learned, didn't silence skepticism. "She's too methodical," one instructor muttered after a session. "Takes too long to set up. In combat, that'll get people killed." "She's accurate, sure," another said. "But accuracy won't matter if the enemy outpaces her." The criticism stung, but she had learned from her father never to argue against doubters. He had once told her, "The world rarely respects quiet precision, but when the moment comes, precision is the only thing that matters." She carried those words like a shield. During her second deployment in Syria, she earned the name Ghost. The mission was simple on paper: overwatch for a team extracting intelligence from a hostile zone. In reality, it was chaos. Urban warfare left no room for error. Streets twisted into traps, windows hid rifles, and rooftops became nests for ambushes. Sophia climbed into position before dawn, camouflaged among rubble and shadows. Hours passed as she scanned through her scope, watching movements most would miss. When the first shots rang out, she was ready. Her rifle barked once, twice, then again. Each round dropped a threat before it could endanger her team. Her position remained invisible. The enemy couldn't even guess where death was coming from. To her teammates, it felt like a ghost protected them, unseen but ever present. By mission's end, not a single soldier under her watch had fallen. The reports later described her as a phantom, an invisible force of precision. The call sign stuck. Ghost. It gave her pride, but it didn't erase doubt. Many commanders respected the record, but some, like Commander Patterson, saw only what they wanted. Patterson had been forged in a different era of warfare, where brute force, relentless aggression, and traditional tactics defined victory. With nearly 2 decades in the Navy SEALs, his chest full of medals, he trusted experience over innovation. And innovation was exactly what Sophia represented. He had nothing against precision in theory. But to him, war was chaos, not calculation. You survived by speed, instinct, and strength. His worldview had little room for soldiers who spent minutes, even hours, aligning numbers in their head before pulling a trigger. And as for a woman taking on the most critical roles, that in his mind was beyond reason. Their paths collided during joint operations, where Sophia's unit provided sniper overwatch for SEAL teams. Patterson tolerated her presence, but never trusted her with essential roles. He'd nod at her reports, skim over her calculations, and then lean on his own men. It wasn't that he believed she was unskilled. He just didn't believe she could carry the weight when the world was on fire. But while Patterson dismissed her, others began to take notice. Sophia's reputation spread across units. Her name circulated in sniper schools, her techniques studied by instructors who wanted to understand how she achieved shots no one else attempted. She integrated science into her craft at a level beyond military doctrine, considering atmospheric physics, wind patterns, even the Earth's rotation when aiming across extreme distances. For her, ballistics wasn't just firing lead, it was harnessing the laws of nature. Still, recognition in whispers wasn't enough to erase the barriers she faced daily. Her innovations were acknowledged in theory, but when missions came, commanders always chose proven methods, which often meant male and traditional. The standoff between tradition and innovation reached its peak when intelligence identified Victor Klov. The rogue scientist's plot threatened not just cities, but civilization itself. His compound was a fortress, nestled in mountains and shielded by air defenses that made bombing runs impossible. To strike him, a sniper would need to fire from a range beyond 7 kilometers, an attempt that lived at the very edge of human capability. Patterson received the initial briefing with the seriousness the situation demanded. "We need our best long-range shooter," he declared, eyes sweeping the room. He didn't look at Sophia. He looked at Petty Officer Marcus Rodriguez, his designated sniper. Rodriguez was skilled, disciplined, but his longest confirmed kill was under 2,000 meters. Against 7,000, the numbers were laughable. Sophia cleared her throat, her voice even. "Sir, I've engaged targets beyond 3,000 meters under combat conditions. My training specializes in extreme range calculations. I believe I can." "Sergeant Vasquez." Patterson's tone was clipped. "This isn't about training records or technical tricks. This is about nuclear war. I need someone with the toughness to fire under pressure. A woman can't make that shot." The room fell silent. Sophia held his gaze for a moment, then simply nodded. She had learned long ago that arguing against prejudice was pointless. Instead, she prepared in silence. She reviewed satellite images, analyzed wind patterns, ran calculations late into the night. She knew the shot was possible, not easy, not likely, but possible. And when the mission began, she positioned herself miles away, her scope fixed on the compound while Patterson's team attempted their approaches. Each effort failed. Defensive systems detected them. The valley swallowed their advances. Days passed, and still Klov lived, his missile closer to launch. Sophia waited, calculated, prepared. She was the backup they never intended to use. But when all else failed, the ghost would be their last resort. The mountains of Central Asia were as merciless as they were beautiful. Jagged ridges clawed at the sky. Snow clung stubbornly to the shaded slopes, and valleys twisted into natural fortresses. It was here, in this unforgiving landscape, that Victor Klov had built his compound. Satellite images showed reinforced bunkers, missile silos disguised beneath camouflage netting, and anti-aircraft batteries scanning the skies. Any strike from above would be suicide. Any assault on foot would be slaughter. For 3 days, SEAL Team 7 tried. Patterson led his men in carefully planned maneuvers, approaching through narrow valleys, testing the defenses. Each time, the attempt ended in disaster. Drones picked up movement, alarms blared, and defensive fire forced them to withdraw before they even came close to effective range. Patterson's frustration grew with every failed attempt. His faith in brute force and traditional tactics collided with the reality of an enemy who had chosen his ground too well. Sophia, meanwhile, lay in the dirt on a distant ridge, her rifle resting steady on a bipod, her scope watching the compound like an unblinking eye. She wasn't part of Patterson's plan. Officially, she was backup, an overwatch position meant only to observe. But she treated every hour as preparation. She recorded wind speeds with a small anemometer. She tracked temperature changes from dawn to dusk. She logged humidity shifts, barometric pressure, even subtle heat mirages rising from the valley floor. Every scrap of data became part of her calculations. She didn't rely on instinct. She relied on science. At night, under the dim glow of a red-filtered lamp, she scribbled numbers into a notebook. Equations filled the pages: wind drift, bullet drop, the Coriolis effect. At 7,000 meters, the Earth's very rotation mattered. A shot fired in the morning might miss by meters if she didn't account for it. And meters, at that range, were the difference between salvation and apocalypse. Patterson visited her once, on the second evening. He crouched beside her hide, his expression lined with exhaustion. "You're wasting your time," he muttered, glancing at the complex equations filling her notebook. "No one can make that shot. Not Rodriguez. Not you. Not anyone." Sophia didn't look up from her scope. "It's possible," she said simply. Patterson scoffed, shaking his head. "Possible doesn't stop nuclear war. Results do." He stood and left before she could respond. But she didn't need his belief. She had her own. On the fourth morning, tension snapped into urgency. Satellite feeds showed frantic activity inside the compound. Trucks rolled into position. Technicians worked in and out of the silo. Radio intercepts confirmed what everyone feared. Clav was preparing to launch. The strike was no longer theory. It was imminent. Patterson tried one final assault. His men advanced under cover of darkness, but again the compound's defenses came alive. Searchlights swept across the valley, artillery thundered, and the team was pinned down, trapped too far to act. Patterson's voice cracked over the comms, laced with desperation. "Command, this is Steele. We cannot reach effective range without being detected. Request immediate air support for a final strike." The reply was cold and final. "Steele, air support unavailable. Defenses too strong. You are authorized to use any tactical solution necessary to prevent launch." The words sank heavy into Patterson's chest. Any tactical solution. He looked across the valley, toward the ridge where Sophia lay hidden. For days he had dismissed her, denied her, doubted her. But now, every conventional option had failed. His men were trapped. His plan was broken. The clock was running out. "Vasquez," he said finally, his voice low over the radio. "Can you make a 7,000-meter shot?" Sophia didn't flinch. She had been waiting for those words. "Commander," she replied, steady as stone, "I've been calculating for 3 days. Wind is variable between 8 and 12 miles per hour, northwest direction. Target follows predictable paths between control station and silo. Shot is feasible with full environmental compensation." "You miss," Patterson said grimly, "and we're staring at global nuclear war." Sophia adjusted her scope. Her gloved fingers moved with mechanical calm. She dialed elevation to account for bullet drop, over 200 feet across the distance. She corrected for wind drift, dozens of meters wide. She factored in temperature, air density, and the subtle pull of a spinning Earth. She thought of her father, of cold mornings in Montana where breath froze in the air as he taught her to slow her heartbeat, of long afternoons when he drilled into her mind that patience saves lives, of the words he had repeated 100 times. One bullet can change history. Now, the truth of those words pressed against her shoulders like the weight of the planet itself. Through her scope, she saw Clav. He moved briskly, clipboard in hand, his coat flaring in the wind as he oversaw final checks. Around him, guards barked orders, engineers worked frantically. Somewhere deep in the bunker, a missile waited, programmed to unleash fire across the world. Sophia steadied her breathing. In, out, half breath held. Her crosshairs didn't rest on him. At 7,000 meters, a bullet didn't strike where you aimed. It struck where you predicted the target would be 8 seconds later. She aimed at empty space, a ghost of where Clav would step. Her mind painted invisible arcs through the air, paths only she could see. "Steele, this is Ghost," she whispered into her mic. "Target acquired. Final calculations complete. Awaiting authorization." The radio crackled. Patterson's voice, carrying the weight of billions of lives. "Ghost, you are authorized to engage. The world is counting on you." The world narrowed into a circle of glass. Through her scope, Sophia saw the compound as if framed in a theater of silence. Guards moved like puppets. Engineers rushed across the concrete. And at the center of it all, Victor Clav barked orders, unaware that 7,000 meters away, a sniper had fixed him in her sights. Sophia adjusted her position one last time, her cheek pressed lightly to the stock, her body steady as stone against the earth. Every movement mattered. Even the pressure of her heartbeat could shift her aim. She slowed her pulse the way her father had taught her: breath in, hold, exhale halfway. Numbers raced through her mind, not as equations, but as instincts. The bullet would drop more than 200 feet. Wind gusts would shift it across dozens of meters. Humidity, temperature, air density, all invisible enemies. And the Coriolis effect, the subtle tug of the planet's rotation, would nudge the bullet just enough to matter. 7,000 meters. Almost 5 miles. A shot no one believed possible. Patterson's voice crackled in her ear. "Ghost, launch sequence has begun. You have less than 30 seconds. Sophia's eyes locked on Clav. He moved toward the control station, clipboard in hand, his pace brisk but predictable. She didn't aim at him. She aimed at where he would be in 8 seconds, the time it would take her bullet to travel the distance at nearly 3,000 feet per second. She whispered to herself, the way she had as a girl lying in Montana grass. Patience, calculation, responsibility. The world seemed to hold its breath. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The shot broke with a sharp crack that echoed only in her hide. The recoil pressed into her shoulder, and then the bullet was gone, vanishing into air and distance. For most shooters, that would be the end. Fire and forget. But for Sophia, the shot was only beginning. She stayed locked on the scope, tracking the path with her mind. 8 seconds. 8 long, impossible seconds. In the first second, the bullet cleared the ridge. In the second, it dropped, pulled downward by gravity, already adjusting in her mental calculations. In the third, wind gusts pushed from the northwest, but she had compensated, dialing her scope to perfection. In the fourth, atmospheric density pressed against the bullet, slowing its flight fractionally. In the fifth, heat mirages bent the air like rippling water, but her angle anticipated the distortion. In the sixth, the Coriolis effect tugged, slightly right as the earth spun beneath. In the seventh, Clav stepped exactly where she had predicted. And in the eighth, history balanced on the tip of steel. Through her scope, she saw Clav falter mid-step. His chest snapped backward as though pulled by an invisible string. The clipboard flew from his hands. He crumpled, lifeless, before his men even realized what had happened. The missile launch sequence froze with his fingers inches from the final switch. "Target down," Sophia whispered. For a heartbeat, there was silence, on the radio, in the compound, in the very air. Then the comms erupted. "Steele, this is command. Confirm status." "Steele, target neutralized." "Repeat, target neutralized." Patterson answered, his voice tight with awe. "Launch aborted." In her hide, Sophia exhaled slowly, her hand still steady on the rifle. Relief didn't flood her. Instead, there was calm, the same calm she had trained for all her life. She had done her duty. Nothing more, nothing less. But Patterson's voice returned, softer this time, humbled. "Ghost, that was the most important shot in human history. You just saved the world." Her eyes stayed on the compound, watching guards panic, watching engineers scatter. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply replied, "Mission complete." The aftermath unfolded quickly. Patterson's men secured the perimeter once defenses faltered. Explosive ordnance teams disarmed the missile systems, and command verified the threat was over. But Sophia stayed in position, maintaining overwatch until every danger was accounted for. That was the sniper's role, unseen, steady, patient until the very end. Later analysis would astonish even the most hardened experts. Her bullet had traveled nearly 8 seconds in flight, dropped over 200 feet, and landed within 2 centimeters of her predicted point of impact. Mathematicians and ballistic experts pored over her notes, stunned that one human mind could calculate variables so perfectly under pressure. Military schools would study her shot for decades. But in that moment, on the ridge with her rifle cooling against the cold earth, Sophia thought only of her father. She remembered his voice, steady and proud. One bullet can change history. He had been right. The world would never know her name, at least not in headlines or parades. To most, she would remain a ghost. But in that silence after the shot, as the valley winds whispered through the mountains, Sophia knew her place in history had been carved by a single trigger pull. And for Commander Patterson, the man who had doubted her from the beginning, the lesson was seared deeper than any scar. He had spent his career believing toughness meant muscle, speed, and instinct. But when the world stood seconds from annihilation, it was patience, calculation, and precision, the very qualities he had dismissed, that saved them all. Sometimes the world is changed not by the loudest voices or the strongest arms, but by the quiet hand that steadies under pressure, by the mind that sees beyond what others imagine. For Sofia Vasquez, ghost of the battlefield, that truth was written in a bullet's path, straight, unwavering, and history-defining. The ridge where Sophia had lain became silent once more. The mission was over, but its consequences rippled across the world. Dr. Victor Klov was dead. The nuclear launch had been halted in its final seconds. And billions of lives, most unaware of how close the world had come to fire and ash, continued untouched. For Sophia, there was no applause, no parade. She remained in her overwatch position long after Patterson's SEALs had stormed the compound and secured it. Explosive ordnance specialists worked to dismantle the missile systems. Engineers collected evidence. Intelligence officers cataloged everything. Through it all, Sophia lay still, her rifle cradled against her shoulder, watching. That was the role of a sniper, not glory, not recognition, but patience until the last threat was gone. Only when command confirmed the facility secure did she finally lower her rifle and step away. Her knees ached from hours in position, her muscles stiff from stillness, yet she carried herself with the same calm discipline as always. No one would have guessed that her single shot had saved civilization. The reports traveled quickly. Analysts studied her calculations with disbelief. Ballistic experts reconstructed the shot and declared it one of the most remarkable feats in military history. At 7,000 meters, the bullet had traveled nearly 8 seconds, dropped more than 200 feet, and crossed shifting winds. Yet Sophia had placed it with mathematical precision. She had aimed not at her target, but at the invisible future position of a man walking into destiny. Her bullet struck within 2 centimeters of her prediction. It was called impossible, until she did it. 6 months later, she stood in a grand hall in Washington, her dress uniform crisp, her braid perfectly tied, as the President of the United States placed the Medal of Honor around her neck. Cameras flashed, generals applauded, and politicians praised. The citation read that she had prevented nuclear war through extraordinary skill and courage under impossible conditions. But as she stood on that stage, Sophia thought only of her father's words echoing in her mind. One bullet can change history. For her, the medal was not about recognition. It was about responsibility. The shot had proven not just her own ability, but something greater, that discipline, intellect, and precision could overcome doubt, prejudice, and tradition. Commander Patterson was there that day, standing among the decorated SEALs. Months earlier, he had doubted her with every word, dismissing her as incapable. But now, he approached her with humility. His handshake was firm, his voice quiet. "Ghost," he said, using her call sign with newfound respect. "I was wrong. You showed me what real strength looks like." From that moment on, Patterson became one of her strongest advocates. He spoke openly to other officers about the danger of underestimating soldiers based on gender, background, or unconventional methods. The most dangerous mistake a commander can make, he often said, is ignoring ability because it doesn't fit tradition. Sophia, however, did not seek speeches or politics. She sought purpose. She turned her attention to training the next generation of snipers. The Army recognized her unique mastery and gave her command of an advanced program focused on extreme long-range shooting. She poured her knowledge into students who arrived from across the branches: Marines, Rangers, SEALs, and even allied forces from other nations. In her classroom, chalkboards were filled not with slogans, but with equations. She taught atmospheric physics, wind analysis, and the mathematics of ballistics at ranges that most soldiers had never imagined. Her students learned that the rifle was not just a weapon but an instrument of science, precision, and patience. She also taught them discipline of mind. She made them lie in the grass for hours without moving, feel their heartbeat slow, and practice controlling the rhythm of their breathing. She taught them to study landscapes the way poets study words, to see the invisible currents of wind, to predict not just where a target was, but where it would be seconds later. Her reputation grew. Soldiers who trained under her carried her lessons into battlefields around the world. They told stories of the Ghost, not as a legend, but as a mentor who demanded excellence, who expected them to rise above instinct and embrace calculation. For them, she was living proof that mastery was not about muscle or tradition. It was about mind, patience, and responsibility. In interviews, when asked about her legacy, she never spoke of medals or records. She spoke of responsibility. Every bullet carries weight, she said. Not just the weight of steel, but the weight of consequences. A sniper must understand that before they ever touch the trigger. And always, when young recruits asked her how she endured the doubts, how she faced commanders who dismissed her, she would smile faintly and reply, "I let my rifle answer." The Ghost had become more than a call sign. It became a philosophy. She remained unseen, her influence woven through every sniper she trained, every lesson she passed down. The boundaries of possibility had shifted because of her. The military no longer looked at extreme-range shots as fantasy. They studied them as doctrine. Her impossible shot had redefined what snipers could achieve. But more than that, her story reminded the world that prejudice blinds, that doubt can kill more surely than bullets, that sometimes the person least expected to carry history forward is the one who saves it. As she walked the training fields, watching her students calculate wind, adjust scopes, and steady their breathing, Sophia knew her father had been right. One bullet had changed history, but the true legacy was not that single shot. The true legacy was every soldier she taught to believe that the impossible was simply another problem waiting for calculation. Ghost had saved the world once. Now, she was shaping the hands that might need to do it again.